Welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. Today we have a great interview with Beth and Greg Langston. They have a great website that helps families choose majors. They've got a lot of information and some great products, and also a great free resource. So if your student is struggling with picking a major, you need to stay tuned.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. In this episode, we've got a great interview with Beth and Greg Langston. We have a great discussion about how to choose a major and some roadblocks that many families have when it comes to picking a major, and some of the costs and problems if we struggle with changing majors too much in college. Beth and Greg are also offering some free resources, so I'd encourage you to go to their website at collegeflightplan.com. When you sign up for their newsletter, they will send you some great information on how to choose a major, some tools that you can use if you're struggling with it, and other information as well. As always, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege/130, which will have all the links and resources that Beth, Greg, and I talk about, so you can get all the information there. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview. Today we're welcoming Beth and Greg Langston. They have a website and some great materials at collegeflightplan.com, and they do a lot around self-discovery. So welcome, Beth and Greg.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
Absolutely, Brad. Good afternoon.
All right. So tell us a little bit about College Flight Plan. You know, it kind of implies that you're, teaching people how to fly or teaching students how to fly, or what's that about?
Exactly.
Well, what we're doing in a nutshell is we help students figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are, what they're passionate about and naturally gifted to do, so they can choose a major that allows them to graduate in 4 years and have a fulfilling career and actually fly out of the home into a successful future. That's what we do.
Yes.
And not fly back into the basement.
And not fly back into the basement, exactly.
Very good. Yes, of course. So we're trying to get our kids launched, or the old analogy of spread their wings and fly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, so I work a lot with families, of course, and I run into this a lot where kids have this undecided challenge where I think there's really two types of undecided. So let's talk about each one a little bit and kind of get your opinions and ideas here. But the first undecided is the super achieving type student who's qualified in a lot of things. You know, they're really strong in music, but they also love math, and they don't really want to go into a career that's math related because they still love history and they're good at English and they love to write, and they've got many talents. And I think sometimes maybe they're afraid to pick one and run with it, or they don't really know because they're capable of doing so many different things. You know, maybe they're afraid of getting bored. How do you deal with that, and what's your opinion on that scenario?
Well, first of all, any listeners out there that have a child like that, you're very fortunate. What typically comes with a very self-directed individual who's very capable, they also come with they set a very high bar to themselves, and they don't want to be wrong. And so when you say pick a major, it kind of freaks them out, because it's like, but I like to do this and I like to do that. And so through the self-discovery process, we help the student to figure out, hey, listen, determine what are your core majors. In other words, what's your primary major? And you can have a minor and maybe, a secondary minor that takes some of that pressure off of saying it's only can be one. It has to be one. And so we found that takes some of the pressure off. But those families that have a student like that are very fortunate, but the student still has to determine what is their focus, because they can't do everything as much as they'd like to. In college, they're not going to be able to do everything.
And we also, Brad, recommend that they take the time to explore those areas that they think they're interested in as professions, like by doing internships or riding along with somebody that does that job that they think they like. Our son is a great example. His whole life, he thought he wanted to study medicine. And as he got older, he said, I think I want to be a surgeon. That'd be great. And so he had the opportunity to go into the operating rooms with a neurosurgeon and a cardiovascular surgeon, and during one of the summers in high school. And after he went along with them and saw what they did, he said, that is not at all what I want to do. It's not what I imagined it to be. And so he ended up going into the financial world. So go figure. He didn't waste money going to all those years of med school, time and money. Can you imagine?
A decade of his life that would have been in
So
something he
expensive.
wasn't passionate about.
Yeah. And
Right,
what's the
absolutely. I
percent
think
of-
that's a big challenge. To go along with that, though, I think we also need to be careful because I've talked with families who, my son went and shadowed an engineer and he decided he doesn't like it because that engineer just sat behind the computer all day and worked in CAD drawing. And it's like,
Oh,
yeah, I can understand. So he's not interested in doing CAD drawing, but engineering is a much broader field. You have an
yes.
engineering degree doesn't mean that you're going to be niched into sitting behind a computer and making drawings. That could be what you do, but you could be in sales, you could be in consulting, you could be on a shop floor, you could, there's all kinds of different paths. So I think, again, understanding if you get elementary ed teaching degree, it's pretty clear where you're going. You get an
Mhm.
engineering degree or you get a liberal arts degree, it's not so clear where you're going. And that's just another challenge that we have to deal with.
Very true.
All right, so let's talk about the other type of undecided student, which would be the more typical student that either just doesn't have a good feel for what they're good at, or maybe they're a late bloomer and they just either don't want to think about it or haven't thought much about it, or when they do think about it, it's not perfectly obvious. But I think we see a lot of this, and especially kind of the average students that are just trying to say, well, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a job of some sort, I could be a teacher. Or maybe I could also, work in business, or, maybe some sort of liberal arts degree. Maybe I should study Spanish. And they just kind of bounce around because they don't seem to have any direction.
Yeah, we see that a lot. And basically what you're talking about is a student who's procrastinating because inside he or she is really concerned about what the heck am I going to do with the rest of my life? And when a parent approaches that, it's kind of like the third rail in the subway system. There's just stress. I don't want to talk about it, Mom. I got things to do. I got homework. I got 3 sports. Get out of my room. Leave me alone. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But what we find is once a student begins the process of self-discovery and they find out that, listen, this is all about you. It's not about your parents. It's not about your friends. It's all about you. And we find you where you are. And then it's kind of like painting by numbers. It's very sequentially developed so that we identify some accomplishments that they have had. Then we identify some additional things that are of interest to them. And what happens is the onion gets peeled off layer by layer, and they start saying, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm really finding out about myself that, you know what, I'm really good at doing this, because they get feedback from third parties. We have 8 trusted advisors that give them a 360 review, in addition to an accountability partner who helps them go through the process to say, come on, you can do this. And they get information relative to their strengths, their weaknesses, how they add value to others, and a confirmation of, from 8 different people, this is what profession that you should pursue based upon how I know you and I've seen you over the years, or this is the major that you should study. And that's really transformative, and it gives a kid a lot of confidence.
Plus, when they're looking to these years of college, it's looking to the unknown, and it's very scary sometimes. And so this, as they get to know and feel confident and clear in who they are, what makes them unique, it takes away those layers of fear, as we were talking about, and they're more equipped to decide what they want to do. A lot of times, sometimes it is not the right choice to go to college right away. Either take that gap year, go explore areas that you think might be interesting to you, or find a profession that doesn't require 4 years or more of college. There's a lot of pressure for these kids to go into college when that's not really the answer for some of them.
As you're describing that, it brings to mind, we went to the Grand Canyon, and you look at the vistas and you see how beautiful it is, and you start walking towards the edge. And if you didn't have a guardrail, you could go over the edge. But the way the guardrails are put and the transitions and the steps that take you through these vistas, you can go through it safely and successfully. And that's basically what we do with the guiding process that we take the students through, to be able to, in a sequential way, get to the other side, see the view, see the horizon, enjoy the experience without the risk of falling over the side.
Right, absolutely. So I actually went to your website. You have some great free resources. I signed up to get your newsletter, and you sent me this great report where you have some free assessments, ideas in there. And I think a lot of high schools will also have some sort of career cruising and different, Zello, I think, is another one. But they have resources where the student can answer 50 questions and it'll spit out, here's your top 3 choices. I know my son came back, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like waste management or something. And he's like, oh, I can be a garbage man. And he just thought that was hilarious.
That's what I was. The same thing for me. Okay. But the good news is we always need garbage collectors. So no matter how the economy's going, we still make a lot of trash.
Right, for sure.
But unfortunately, a lot of schools default to that and say, we're using Naviance or we're using another tool. And just take this assessment and it'll tell you everything you need to know about what you want to do for your future. And that depends upon how you feel one day, how you answer the multiple choices that one day. And we personally don't think that's enough.
Right. And I would agree that it's probably not enough. It may be a place to start, because I think, again, in the undecided realm, we just mentioned that. I guess the other thing that I see, and I don't know, I'm sure what you see is probably a whole lot of undecided kids because they gravitate towards you. But what I see, kind of in the general population, is there is a kind of a batch of kids, maybe a third to a half, that are very focused. They know kind of what they want to be. They say, I'm going to school to become a teacher. They made that decision, right or wrong. And again, I think a lot of times they make the decision, they pursue it, and they end up changing careers or majors anyway. But at least they feel like they've got a path.
Exactly. Right. They feel like it, but it may not be the right one if they haven't done the work to explore what their gifts and their interests and their talents are. Right.
So again, if we can pick a path, it makes our life easier. I think sometimes parents might pressure a little bit around just, you need to pick something. So sometimes students might be a little bit, flippant's not the right word, but they don't know how to do it. So they just pick something so that the pressure is off. It's like, what do you want to be? Firefighter.
It happens a lot.
Right. That's what I picked when I was 4. I'm going to stick with it, because then people, every time people ask me that question of what are you going to be when you grow up, and or where do you want to go to school, I've got an answer, and then we can just move on. And it doesn't have to be the right answer. It just has to be an answer.
And that answer turns into the statistics, which are that 40% of college graduates today, only 40% graduate in 4 years, a full 60% graduate in 6 years. And 60% of them change majors at least 3 times. And that's why it's taking the 6 years. And the thing is, if you look at average cost of college, on the low end, it's $30,000. On the high end, it's $80,000. And you have an extra 2 years, that's $60,000 to $160,000 of additional debt or expense that somebody's got to pay for.
And some of them drop out after 2 years with that debt, 2 years of debt, and no job.
And haven't figured out what they want to do.
Exactly. I mean, I remember going back to my high school reunion and bumping into a, kind of a casual friend I had in high school. We hadn't, reconnected after 10 or 15 years since the last reunion that we were both at. And he had said that he went to a relatively expensive private school for 3 years and essentially dropped out and moved on and had a career unrelated to what he was studying. But in talking to him a little bit, he had like $75,000 of student loan debt still, and he was struggling, to pay that off. And of course, he got no benefit from that because he ended up changing directions. So we certainly want to avoid that. Another example that comes to mind when we talk about changing majors is I had a young lady that had about 3 years into nursing school, and she was switching to engineering. And she had 75 or 80 credits. And when she actually transferred to engineering, only like 22 or something like that actually transferred. So she had 3 years of college under her belt. When she transferred, it amounted to a little less than a year towards engineering. So obviously,
because
if we
she
could
hadn't
avoid
had
that,
the opportunity.
Yes. if we can avoid that, that would be great.
Explore.
But the challenge is, how do we avoid that? And I think that's kind of the key for what you guys are providing. So let's talk a little bit more. I think inside your courses, you've got a self-discovery course is what you call it. And there's kind of a full-on and maybe a self-discovery light. And what are the names again as far as?
There's the comprehensive self-discovery, which is a 12-hour program, not in one sitting. All the videos and the training is an average of 2.5 minutes, because we know that young people, in fact, their parents as well, have a very short attention span. And so all the information is transmitted in 2.5 minutes or less on average. And it's all mobile optimized and with interactive workbooks. And so they can work through that. If they're aggressive and they spend time, they can do that in a week or 2 weeks. They can get through all that information. There's also an essential one that's 6 hours that takes obviously half the time. And then we also offer it for some, since it's mobile optimized, we offer some families, in fact, internationally around the world, Albania, Colombia, and other places. Parents say, listen, I want you to take my student through this process, and I want you to handhold them and mentor them. So we offer it up to a 12-week weekly call to make sure that the student gets through the process. And then one of the unique features of our self-discovery is that the student has to present their whole process to their parents and their accountability partner.
Yeah. Interesting. You mentioned the accountability partner. Let's talk about that, because I think that's a unique thing that I haven't heard or seen anywhere. And I've been, involved in this for 15 years now. What is an accountability partner, and how does that fit into whether they use your courses or not? Explain a little bit more about that.
Sure. An accountability partner is someone who's going to hold the student accountable to finish the process, just like you as a financial planner are holding the families that you're working with in their managing their wealth strategies and their retirement strategies. Say, hey, Greg, it's time to sit down. We got to make these decisions relative to X, Y, and Z. You got to do that. And the statistics show that if you just say, I'm going to do something, the probability is single digit. If you share with your friends and family, the probability of success is 65%. If you have an accountability partner, it goes up to 95%. And so what we do is we have the student pick an accountability partner. And most people on the air right now are thinking, well, that's going to be one of their buddies, one of their friends. And typically, it's very unusual that they do that. They typically pick a friend, a relative, or a mentor.
Right, exactly. So I know when my son was working on his college essay, first of all, essays are not my thing. I'm much in the financial side, so I'm not really qualified to get involved. But he chose to work with a close family friend who, and again, once it's not mom and dad, I think that's one step in the right direction for a lot of reasons. One being their attempt to become independent as they're going through their teenage years makes it a little challenging for them to work with mom and dad. So I think you can use an accountability partner for the entire college process or part of this getting through the course. Now, do you use the accountability partner as part of the self-directed courses that you're offering? Is that part of the courses as well?
Yes.
Right.
All courses, they have to pick an accountability partner.
After each step, they share their results with their accountability partner to keep them on task.
Right. So I see that a lot, or recommend that a lot, where in talking with parents, I hear a lot of, well, we're really struggling with getting the applications done. We're really struggling with, picking schools or moving this process along. And I often recommend, well, can you, as parents, kind of get out of the process a little bit, and maybe there's an aunt or uncle or a good family friend or someone else that could step in, because your student will treat them with a lot more respect, perhaps give them a little more time to talk. I mean, again, students hear mom talking or dad talking, they jump to conclusions before you've said 5 words that you're being, negative or critical sometimes, or whatever it might be. So I love that idea of an accountability partner.
And we also, when we mentor the students, we get the parents saying, could you tell them this? Because they're not listening to me. We're like, sure, we'll try. So.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a challenge that many families have. And I think the idea of an accountability partner is great. So another thing that, this parent starter kit, again, let's talk about that. How do you get the parent starter kit again? We are going to go to your website and...
They go to collegeflightplan.com/guide.
Okay.
collegeflightplan.com/guide. and they'll get a 33-page document that has the 5 key things you should help your student do to start the college process, some important statistics that every parent should know in terms of, how a student, how they do in college, how much it costs. The fact that, and surprisingly enough, 87% of people that are 16 to 29 say they have no purpose or meaning, which just underscores the fact that they don't do this self-discovery and this review prior to going to college. And so that's why they are changing majors and doing these other things. But in addition, they have free assessments that we recommend, some ACT, SAT prep. We don't do that, but we have some resources that we can recommend. And then one of the things that goes unnoticed, and this is right in your wheelhouse, is the opportunity to reduce costs and scholarships. That if you do it properly, you can get scholarships that you'd be surprised how many are out there. And Brad, this is your wheelhouse. You know exactly how to do that.
Right.
And so we've identified some locations where they can find information, but surely they can go and talk with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got many podcasts on the concept of scholarships, need-based, merit-based. So you can go back in our catalog.
That's so great.
And we'll put that in our show notes as well.
Brad, do you find that some of them go unrewarded because people don't know they're there available?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I gave a presentation at a high school a couple of years ago, and as part of that presentation, we often talk about scholarships. The school counselor was in the room, so I asked her if, what's going on with scholarships, and she essentially said, well, we've got one scholarship. We give out 4 awards per year. We only had 4 applicants. And this scholarship is targeted to the student athletes.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, that's interesting. And of course, there was 100 people in the room that heard that and, oh my God, kind of thing was going on. So I'm sure they got a lot more applicants the next year. But after a few years, I'm pretty sure that, things will quiet down and it'll be right back to the way it was. So yes, there are certainly a lot of scholarships out there. And I think there's kind of a pecking order as far as how much time and effort you put into that. And I think that's another challenge with families is, you've got a great course here on self-discovery and personal growth and picking majors and what, where you're going with your life and that type of thing. The challenge is it's competing with test prep and competing with all their AP courses and competing with all their college applications and their essays. So where does this fit in? When do you recommend students start trying to figure out majors and career paths and that type of thing?
Well, we always say the earlier the better. Even with little kids, you can start. There are books about what to ask a kid when they come home from school. Like, how did you use your strengths today? So when they're little, they start realizing, oh, these are my strengths. These are my interests. How did you show kindness today in your class? Instead of how was school? Who did you sit by at lunch? Ask more probing questions of them. But for our course, we like to get freshmen through senior. I do believe the earlier the better, because then they realize that they need to start pursuing activities that speak to their strengths so they can verify what they've found in their course. But starting early is key. And
one of the things that we find that when a student goes through self-discovery, they interrupt the pattern that typically happens in high school is you start as a freshman, you're figuring out what high school is like, and then you start adding more and more and more and more activities because they're there. And all of a sudden you're in 3 sports, you're doing all this extra stuff, you're doing the essays and so on and so forth. And you're overwhelmed and everybody's running around with their hair on fire, families, students alike. By going through that self-discovery process and the student saying, you know what, I'm interested in this. I love my sports, but do I really need to be in 3 sports? That takes a lot of time. Why don't I just do one of them if that's what I want to do and deselect some things to allow myself to focus on an internship or some AP courses or doing the essays, and I have a little more time to do that. And so it's very beneficial for the student to actually deselect doing some things that comes as a result of going through that self-discovery.
Absolutely. All right. Well, as we're working through here, another thing that I notice is there's a couple of free resources. So I want to emphasize that I think with everything else, right, you can do it a little bit, you can do it a lot. And I think some families maybe just plugging into the free resources at the high school and plugging into the free resources that you're offering on this handout is great. And then from there, you can kind of escalate as you need to, get involved in the course that you're offering or whatever it might be. Because I
Definitely.
think
And
there's,
like for the free resources and even test prep, that gets expensive too for the ACT, SAT prep classes. But you can get a book online like the Princeton Review that has 8 tests in it and just start practicing. And practice makes perfect. That's what we recommend for that. And that costs a lot less than a class, but you have to be a motivated student to want to do the practice.
right. And that's a great question too. So do you think the stuff that you're providing is appropriate for that, less than motivated kid? Again, I've had situations where parents say things like, well, they think they want to go to college, but, they're not acting like it. They're not looking at schools. They're not doing any sort of research. This is going to happen. I'm going to have to do most of the work. I'm going to have to pick some schools and do some visits. And so if we have a student that's a little less motivated, is this a good path? And where would it fit, and how would you present it to the student to get them to actually participate?
Well, what we've done, we've had a number of students that are like, oh my gosh, this is something else my mom and dad are making me do. I'm not sure what I want to do. And they start the first video, and the first video is 2.5 minutes. And it's all interactive videos with airplanes and so on and so forth, saying, listen, this is all about you. It's not about your parents, not about anybody else. It's about you framing your future life. And we're going to come alongside you and help you discover your story, your unique story, because we believe that every single human being can create their own unique story. And so we meet them where they are, and then we build that information on the process. Just as I was taught these things when I was an executive in large companies, they kind of layered the learnings to me as I was running $1 million business, a $10 million business, a $500 million, and then $1 billion business. They had to layer that learning onto me, and so we do the same thing with our discovery process. So that at the end of the process, the student will come out, even the one who's unmotivated. Part and parcel of the process, the student will say, "Mom and Dad," because they have to report out. They say, "These are my values, and this is why they're important. These are my strengths, and these are my weaknesses." And this is how I add value to other people. These are my goals for when I'm 65 in the areas of health, wealth, wisdom, and relationships. These are my 5-year goals in support of those, my 1-year goals in support of these. This is how I instinctively solve problems based upon an assessment I took. And this is my distinct natural ability, which is a paragraph that they frame that says, based upon my discovery, I can do this really well. This is my wheelhouse, so I can volunteer in school or at work or in other activities, knowing that I can do this distinct natural ability. Then armed with that, they say, with all that's positive, what are 2 things that I'm doing now that's currently incorrect? And what they do is they say 2 habits. They invariably say too much social media and not enough sleep. And this has come from the kids telling their parents. Then what you do is you say, armed with that, these are my core majors. This is what I should study. These are the 3. And let me give you my elevator speech, which is a memorized 1-minute speech that says, it's 150 words. This is who I am. These are my strengths. This is what makes me unique. And this is why I need to go to your college. And this is why I need to go speak to somebody else at admissions, because I want to contribute to your school. And the parents listen to that and they're like, oh my gosh.
So for those unmotivated students, it's so fun to see how suddenly after the first tool they go through, it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. That is me. Now I understand. As they keep progressing along, it's like the light goes off or goes on, I guess. And it's amazing to see the transformation and to see the parents' appreciation for their transformation, because they have more clarity in knowing their values and strengths, weakness, purpose, major or career they're going to pursue. They have this greater confidence in clearly understanding and articulating what makes them unique. And they can use that in their application process, in their interview process. And they all feel like they have a little bit more control over their futures because now they have actionable plans and goals. It's really cool.
All right. Well, that sounds great. And again, I've seen a lot of transformation happen. I was just looking through some of the materials, and I noticed there's things like the Colby assessment in here and
Yep.
Yes.
your DNA.
Yeah.
So you guys are using some of the top science, and kind of, this has been a area that has been studied for maybe the last 20 or 30 or 40 years pretty aggressively as far as, well, how do we get to the next level? Just like if you wanted to be an Olympic gymnast, there's things you do when you're 7, so that there's things you can do when you're 9, so that there's things you can do when you're 12, so that when you're 15, you're on your way to the Olympics. It seems like there's a lot of assessments and other tools that you're using and kind of applying it. So I think there's many people out there that either through their work, because they're at a corporation or larger employer where they're trying to do assessments and trying to optimize the team, that they're using things like Colby and other things. So some parents may be familiar with some of that. And
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's where we built it from. Plus, many schools now are very focused on SEL, social emotional learning, which in itself is very positive. But what we found that is lacking is that understanding of self, of your values, how you feel, how you're treating others, therefore needs to be put into action. What are you going to do next? How are you going to use that information going forward? And that's a disconnect that currently exists in SEL. And we presented this recently to one of the leaders of the local school district. And he said, in my 38 years of teaching, I've never seen a program this comprehensive that takes into account the social emotional learning together with the individual, the student, and the teacher. And so we're on path to put in a pilot process into the #1 school system here in San Diego.
wow, that sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. So
Well, it's our hope that this would be in all the high schools in America or something like it. We don't understand why, Greg doesn't understand why he had to wait 20 years after college to get some of these assessments that helped him be a good leader and a good team player. And it's so beneficial to young people to get this early.
yes, absolutely. I think another big challenge is people don't know what they don't know. So
Exactly.
and that's where I think coaching and that type of thing, just in general, like, I mean, the whole world is starting to provide a lot more coaching. I mean, if you want to become a better baseball player, you can do it, or golfer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where coaching is obvious, right? But now there's
Right.
coaching around, getting into college, getting through college, picking your major, all the things around test prep and essays and all that kind of stuff. And that's becoming more common and people are more aware of it, but it's becoming more ubiquitous because in the end, if you identify something that you want to strengthen or get better at, whatever it is, if you can find some way to get some coaching or help, for a lot of times, I think that can make a huge difference. And I think it has, again, a concept that you mentioned much earlier, of course, it has a built-in accountability partner where if you have a coach that says, well, you need to spend time in the batting cage, and you come back a week later and how much batting time did you have? And you say 0, the coach, again, depending on the type of coach, may motivate you a number of different ways. But thinking back to some of my coaches in sports, they were pretty hard on you if you didn't, show up and practice.
Right.
And you certainly didn't get to play
Football.
when they learned those types of things.
Right. So true. And I think a lot of parents assume that the high school counselor is going to be the person that holds their student accountable for going through this college application process. But high school counselors are spread too thin. They do a great job with the students that are squeaky wheels, but the average, the ratio is 424 students to every one college counselor in America. Here in California, we have 900 students per one college counselor. The recommended amount is around 200. So they can't help every student that needs help. They can't hold them accountable that they're going through the process in a timely fashion. That's where you have to get outside coaching, as you say.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And not only are they, again, if you're spending money and you're at a private high school, a lot of times there is what's called a dedicated college counselor, where their job is to work with the juniors and seniors and help them with the college process, picking schools, writing essays, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But especially at the public schools, the school counselors are not college counselors. They're school counselors. They're dealing with teen pregnancy. They're dealing with, truant students. They're dealing with all kinds of issues. And on top of that, they're also trying to facilitate college for the half or the quarter or the 3/4 that are going to go on to college. And they are spread thin in many ways. I agree with that. And I think the bottom line here is starting early.
Starting early.
Absolutely.
As you mentioned, maybe these assessments are appropriate for as early as freshman year.
Yes.
What I find around the college process is whenever the student's mature enough is when you start. So sometimes it's a freshman or sophomore year. But if
So
they're not
true.
mature by junior year, then you kind of have to go without them. I mean, you have to say it's time to mature. It's time to get involved in this and get to work. And
And
start
this
building some
process
plans. What are we
might
going to
help
do?
them.
Yeah, what are we going to do junior year? If we're struggling with majors and that kind of stuff, maybe we need to do this assessment junior year so that we don't get, end of junior year and find ourselves in the exact same spot of we still don't know anything and now we only have 3 months to figure it out. Whereas a year ago we didn't know anything, but at least we had a year and 3 months to figure it out.
Right.
Right.
I mean, again, so I really like your stuff. Again, your website, collegeflightplan.com. And I'm sure we're going to be talking some more and in future podcasts as well.
Absolutely, Brad. It'd be a pleasure.
All right, that was a great interview with Beth and Greg. Hopefully you learned a ton. I encourage you to go visit their website at collegeflightplan.com if you want to learn more. Now, don't go away. Our next segment, we're going to talk about My Intuition, a great website that helps families understand how need-based aid works at some of these more expensive private schools. Let's go ahead and jump into it.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
Today I'm recommending myintuition.com. So this is a website where you can get an additional financial aid calculator for about 75 schools. Now, typically these schools are the top private schools, both universities and liberal arts colleges. There's just a couple of public schools on the list where they have calculators for UMass and UVA. These calculators are simplified and they work really well as far as getting a quick estimate of what college may cost. They only ask about 7 questions. They ask about the citizenship of the student, family income, home equity if you have any, cash that the parents may have, retirement plans and investments, although this information is not used in the calculation. They ask about it to help you think about it so that you don't add it to the other areas, which would be the non-retirement investments. And then finally, they ask if there's multiple kids in college at the same time. Once you've entered this information, they will give you a low, best, and high estimate of how financial aid may work out as far as need-based aid. So as an example, I'm looking at an estimate here where it says the low estimate is $7,800. The best estimate is $13,000 and the high is $18,000. And that's the ultimate student and parent contribution for college. So in this example, they have $3,500 for a student loan, $1,000 for student work, $58,000 scholarship, and a $13,000 contribution from the student and or the parent for a total cost of the college of $75,000. And again, they also have a low estimate and a high estimate. If you look into the fine print, what they're telling us is that the best estimate is about the median for families with these statistics, but anywhere between the low and the high estimate is where most people are going to land. Something like 90% of families will land between the low or the high, somewhere in between. So what I really like about these calculators is that they're pretty simple to work with and they're pretty clear as far as what the output is telling you. Again, they break it into 4 categories, loan, work, scholarship from the college, and contribution from the student and or the parent. Now, these calculators are typically for the high-end private schools that tend to offer a lot of aid. So it's going to have colleges like the Ivy League and Stanford, and as well as the liberal arts colleges like Williams, Boston College, Boston University. So there's a lot of different colleges, but there's only about 75. And of course, there's over 2,000 colleges, so it's a pretty small segment. But if the colleges you're considering fall on this list, I think it's a great place to look and just do a quick calculation for a couple of the schools. So again, that's myintuition.com is where you can go and look up the 75 schools. Now, of course, each of these colleges will also have a link on their website. So what I've seen is that if you go to their need-based aid calculators or their net price calculator, on the page they'll have 2 choices. One is you can do this My Intuition calculation, or you can do the full-on net price calculator. So again, if you're looking at some of these high-end schools, I highly recommend you check it out. As always, we appreciate reviews. So if you can leave us a review in iTunes or wherever you are getting your podcast, that would help other people find us. And please share our information with whoever else you might feel would benefit from it, especially perhaps your school counselor or college counselor, and let them know that we've got a great podcast out there that they should be listening to. And of course, go to our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. We've got lots of resources and lots of links to outside resources as well. That's all we have for today. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.